Just a quick tip video on how to do an alternator on a 2006 Range Rover HSE full size with a 4.2 liter Jag motor. It's got a supercharger in it, which makes it all that much more difficult to get the alternator where you can see is way back in there. I discovered it bad because I heard a grinding noise. I used a little mechanic stethoscope and easily located the bearing noise. Funny, the check engine light was on at the same time. They're always on these cars for some reason, and I guess maybe it was the alternator. I just waited for it to fail on me to fix it. But the grinding noise was getting bad enough where I decided to replace the alternator. The tools, it's a nice idea to have air tools. I have a 220 volt air compressor hooked up. It was worth the money. You get a lot more power, use a lot more tools, things go a lot quicker. I use a variety of Snap-on, Harbor Freight, Cobalt, whatever's on sale, whatever's working. The Harbor Freight brand actually is not bad at all. They do the job for a lot less. And if you're just a backyard mechanic like myself, I was a pro mechanic when I was a kid, did something else, but I've always stayed working on cars. These things work really good for the price. I think I paid $23 for a set of 6 of these in metric. So for this car, you're going to need, I was using 1/4 inch 8mm, 10mm, 3/8 50mm sockets. You'll need a 13mm wrench like this. The one with the flex bolt and the ratchet makes it really easy to remove the hot lead off the alternator. And as they say in England, you need some spanners. And if you work it at night, make sure you have your torch. Yeah, there's a couple different ways to do it. Is it British Atlantic, YouTube on the 4.4? They remove it from underneath. I pulled my underneath of this car off anyway, just so I can clean it. Plus I was going to do the oil change. I really cleaned it good, so I don't like working on a dirty engine. I cleaned the top as well. Clean it first after you remove this, if you so to choose do so. First step in all of this is always disconnect your battery, the positive and then the negative. Make sure the battery's clean. A little bit of water and baking soda works really well. Make sure and rinse it off. To get this cover off here, you have to take this off. It's where the air filter for the interior is located. It's located in here. If you press these down, you'd see it under there. These cars are put so wonderfully together. You can see how to tape this one shut because it cracked along the edge. Anyway, 2 13mm nuts and bolts hold this on. It usually works with just spinning this side off, but sometimes this rotates, so you put the wrench on that side, one on this side, just crank, it comes off. Take this one off, take the one off on the other side, and take them completely out, put them aside, and this whole piece pulls out. Once you pull it out, my suggestion to you is to block the air inlets with a couple of towels, which I did, and then you'll clean the rubber up. I clean everything up. I use my air hose to clean out any dust and debris prior to cleaning, and then I'll spray. Then after that's out, forgot to tell you, I need to take, there's 4 of these, 4 nuts to take these off. I think they're 10mm. There's 2 here, 1 here, 1 on the other side, and the other 2 are located underneath this. That's why you have to take this off. Don't forget to pull off your oil cap, or this will not come off. After you pull your oil cap off, put it back on. If you disconnect this, when you disconnect this, shove a rag in here as well, and there'll be another air inlet underneath this. Shove a rag in that, cover it up. And I wouldn't remove anything else, especially this, the computer center, and then clean your engine. You can get it dry, and if you want, let it sit overnight so it's really dry. And with this off, you can get up underneath on top of the engine in the cracks and crevices. After I clean it, I use the air pressure for my compressor to blow out any of the standing water that gets caught in the crevices. Don't be afraid to use the cleaner liberally. There's several different types. I use citrus, I'll use gunk. I don't use the purple stuff. It's a little bit strong, could hurt the plastics. Read the bottle, make sure it's not going to harm any of the plastics. Anyway, working on a clean engine is 10 times better than working on a dead engine, a dirty engine. Okay, now on to replacing the alternator. For the Supercharged, this is what I found out. Again, disconnect the battery, remove the pans from underneath, and when those little teeny tabs break, they do break all the time. I'll show you in another video what I do to repair them, because I'm going to have to repair a couple. This was one repair I did. It lasted a couple of years, and now I'm going to have to fix a few more. Don't go out and spend a fortune and buy new bolts or those little clips. You just go on over to Harbor Freight, buy a U-clip it assortment for a few bucks, and you'll have enough to put the thing back together easily. Now, jack it up. Yeah, I just jack it up how I want. My nice, reliable, very old Harbor Freight jack. I got a metal plate in there. Put this on the bar that holds the back control arm bushing up. I jacked it up enough to get my heavy duty jack stand and my backup one under there. I pull the tire, just gives you more light. Headlight, you can take the headlight off. You pull the grill trim. This somewhat pops out fairly easy. It's got a couple screws on the bottom. The headlight's only held in with a couple of screws. And this, make sure that this is drained of water. Don't leave it out in the rain. You can give it a quick clean down also. Once that's removed, the next thing I would do is you got to take a 15 millimeter socket, 3/8, and you go from underneath. I'll show you. This one I'm going to keep calling my spanner. I take a flexible one with a flexible head, 3/8 long reach. I put my 15 millimeter socket on it and the belt tensioner right up there. I attach it. You can see this is a flexible head, and then I loosen it. Once it's loosened, you don't need to buy one of those fancy schmancy bars that they tell you to buy to loosen the belt tensioner. Now I have this one attached because I had to redo something, because normally this would be off. I took my second flexible 3/8 and I used one of those little round, looks like a quarter on the outside, and ridged extension adapters, and I attached that to the end of my ratchet or spanner, and I got it into the teeny, the 3/8 hole. Let's see if we can see where that's at down here. It's kind of hard to see, but it's right down in there. You'll see it. You'll see the place where you put you don't need a socket or anything. It's just the drive end of the ratchet. You just stick it in the hole. Then with that little spinner, you don't have to worry about getting at the right angle. You just use your fingers, twist until it gets in the hole, pop it in, and stick your long ratchet on it, flexible. I then took my Harbor Freight long handle from the aluminum one, put slid the end over the ratchet. Make sure you have it going in the right direction, and the direction that you need to move it is this way, from towards the battery side of the car. So bring the ratchet as far over this way as you can to the front of the car. Let's back this off this way. So the ratchet will be sitting somewhere over here. attach that to it, and pry over. If you're by yourself and you have nobody to help you out, it works very easily. I get a couple of tie straps. I already have these attached. I put it through here, and then once I get it where I want it, which is going to be right before the this AC inlet, you don't want to break that and talk more money. Right up to about right there works fine. Tie it off, and then either climb underneath or from the top, and then you could simply just remove the belt. You don't have to take it off, just pop it off. Next step, of course, is removing the alternator. To get to the alternator from here, the top bolt, you can access it from the bottom. It's very easy. I use an impact wrench. I bought these at Harbor Freight for swivel, because you do need a little bit of a swivel if you want to use an impact, and I used a 3/8 with a pretty long extension. And the socket, I believe, is a 13 millimeter. There's 2 bolts on the very bottom of the alternator. I'll show them from here. Yeah, correct. That's correct. Here, when I've done, it's fixed. It's fixed right. Come on, cheapy. All right. You can see right there's the bottom of the alternator, and there's the 2 13 millimeter wrenches. I don't think they're 15. They could be. I could be off. I don't know. I've messed with this so many times. Spin them off, and you can actually get to the top one from here also. You just need a little bit of an extension, and you go up and through here. Make sure you got the right bolt. Undo it, and I actually used I broke it free with a 3/8 ratchet, and then I used a little 1/4 inch, and this is a 13 millimeter, a 1/4 inch, and I spun it off afterwards. That way I'm not sitting there twisting forever. And of course, you can access it from the top. Now, if you don't want to cut yourself and you don't want to bleed to death and fight and scream and swear, take these few extra steps. Remove the 2 bolts from this, which I believe are 15, no, these are 13s, 13 millimeter. And then this little doohickey, this is the bracket that holds your overflow tank on. These are a little bit more tricky. Once this is removed, it's, I believe, 8 millimeter, 4, like that 4 nuts, 3 or 4, I don't freaking know, 3, hold these on. One is here, so this thing sits in here like this. And remember this wire here that goes to the bottom of your tank, it's going to, when you're done with it, it's actually going to come over the top of this. Just make sure it's not in the, you don't cut it, it's very thin. So you remove that 8 millimeter nut from there, and then you can squeeze in through here, remove that one, and then the hardest one, of course, is the one down here. Now, I managed using, you could use a 1/4 inch ratchet or spanner. I actually got in there with this, a short one. I used a short 8 millimeter 1/4 inch drive ratchet, and if you work your way in properly, you can squirm it in there. What's funny is that the switch to turn it on, if you have it at an angle, you use it to your advantage, and what you do is once it gets in there, you'll notice sometimes it just starts pressing, which I did. I used to my advantage. I got the socket on the bolt, and then I just pressed forward and ran it until it was out, and it became a little tight because as it goes out, it's going to push it up against the shroud, and then out it popped, and I saved it. Make sure you have a magnetic picker-upper thing. It's handy. Take that bracket out. It might be a little rusty. Take it out. I cleaned it up and just sprayed it up with some black paint. This thing will save you a ton of scratches. Couple extra minutes worth work, and it's easy. This is the this section right here at the top is where the grommet sits for the overflow tank, and that's those two little nuts that are welded on or screwed in, are used to hold down the front part of the or the back side of the overflow tank. Now, this is the worst part of this. Getting the alternator out. For me, I did it first from underneath. And I literally about killed myself. Since it was an old alternator, I didn't care. I used pry bars. I found out afterwards I was able to install it through the top on this one without damaging anything. And if I had to do it again, which I do have to take it out now for a reason I'll explain in a second, so you don't have to go through what I went through, is to I would remove it from the top. You just got to be careful with these hoses. You know, you don't want to cut anything, especially this. If you cut this one, not such a big deal. You cut this one, break this one, now you're spending money. This is the 3-pin connector back here. It's kind of hard to see. It's located right here, and there's the red lead is the hot one. That's, I mean, obviously that's why you disconnect the battery, because you touch that and ground, and you get welded to the frame. That is a 13 millimeter. You had to undo that one first. Kind of a pain, because these things are kind of a pain to pop back. They don't stay back, and that's where my flexible wrench, 13 millimeter wrench, comes in handy. Put that sucker on. Use the open end first just to get it loose, and pop this one on and go at it. You might have to get 2 fingers in there to hold it, but once it spins loose, you'll notice that once it's out, if your plastic cap, the plastic red cap, snap back on, the nut may not go anywhere. The new alternator should come with a new one, so you'll have 2 no matter what, just in case you lose one. I couldn't get the 3-pin connector out. It was in there. No matter what I did, it was brittle. The tab broke. Similar to any one of these tabs, but it's a 3-pin. It's small, and just happens to be very unique to this car. And they do not sell it separately anywhere. You have to buy the whole harness. Range Rover wanted $400-something for that harness. A whole engine wiring harness used is close to $500, and it's not worth it. So I'm gonna have to come up with a rig today. Anyway, what I ended up doing was taking a little screwdriver, having to tap it out. When I did, it shattered into a million pieces, leaving me 3 wires, with nobody to tell me how they connect. I will tell you, just in case they do split and you have to rig up something. The brown wire, you'll see when you look at the back of the alternator, the pins are in like this order. So you'll see 3 pins like this, facing backwards. This is the alternator. The brown wire goes on this one. It's the closest to the red. The white wire with the red stripe goes to the back. And then what's left over is the white wire with the green, and that goes to the center. I'm pretty sure that's the order. I could be off. And if I am off, I will update it in the video that I'm going to do next, and that is how to fix the pins. I could be off on those colors, but I did hook them up right. So look for my other video in the next day or 2 to show you how to fix that if I got the order wrong. Again, take your time in taking that pin out, the connector out. It's so worth the money and hassle. You have no idea what I've been through dealing with that already. Now, once you've got that out, you can now take the new alternator, you can worm it back in here. Once it's in here, I find that you go ahead and connect the wiring up while the car is, obviously while it's in here. I had to make an extension because I had to rig one for this. Again, I have to take it out again today because there's something wrong with it. I popped one of the wires out from the connections, so I got to redo it. And then that little 13 millimeter hot lead is a pain to work on. So what I did is I took a tie strap and I ran the tie strap around. At the time, the top bolt was not fully screwed in. I just ran a tie strap around this, and I pulled it tight and taut, and it pulls it out of its way. Getting it on, I don't care who you are, you're gonna be screaming and yelling trying to get that little 13 millimeter nut on the side of that alternator. It's a pain. So what I did is, after finagling it, took me a few minutes just to get the first couple of threads going so it doesn't fall off, and getting in there, you're going to see, is a pain. I took the flex ratchet, I put it on, and since you're one person, it's nice to have two hands. What I did is I put my finger, I'm a lefty, which makes it a little bit easier. I got this on, I wormed it on, and then I left it there. And then, because every time you move it, since it's not tight, guess what? The nut moves with it. So how do you hold it down and move it at the same time? You can't get a ratchet in there. It's barely impossible. Range Rover mechanics may know how to do it, but you're doing this in your backyard. So I took my magnetic thing, I held the nut in this end with this hand, and what I did is this. I let it drop, and then I used this, attach it to the end, and it has enough force where I pulled it up, and when it popped off, I pushed it back down. And I did that, 7 or 8 times until I got to the point where I could actually worm my hand in there and get it down taut, and then I finally do the final tightening with this. Double check to make sure that your wires are not touching any part of the engine, the block. There's a little clip down there for you can see from underneath that pops out of the engine block. Make sure that's popped back in. Don't forget to undo the tie strap. And then put the tight torque. I didn't see any torque settings for the alternator. Tight. I used a impact wrench on the bottom and I hand tightened the top one. They are in there fairly tight, but you don't have to overdo it. Just get them in there tight. I would do it like a lug wrench, like you're doing a tire. Next, slip the belt on. I bought this stuff online. You can buy it at AutoZone. It's called 303. People put it on alternator belts, rubber, leather, everything. They're used in aircraft. It's called 303. I coat the belt a little bit with it before I put it on. And this car's got over 100,000 miles on it, and I've been using the 303 for a long time, and the belt doesn't even have 1 ounce of wear, so the belts are still good. So you want to get the belt back on. That's a simple task. Now all you're going to do is slip the belt on, make sure that it's on the rest of the pulleys properly, or else you'll have a problem when you start it up. And then you come over here, hold this tight, get another tie strap set up, ready, and now you're going to crank this sucker down, pull it down towards you, get it relatively tight. If you leave it in the same area that you started from, and just a tad more, you should be fine. I did tie strap this off. I believe it was down here is where I did put the tie strap on. And I also, you can use a bar if you want. You can run a bar between the air mass if you want, if you can get it in there. And put it through here just to hold it. A person would help, be the best thing to do it. But the tie strap worked fine with me just pulling it over and running it through. I don't remember exactly which holes I did, but I did hold it with a tie strap and then got it underneath after tighten up, and then I got it underneath with my ratchet other ratchet still attached to the belt tensioner, and I went ahead and tightened down the bolt holding the tensioner, and then took the ratchet off. And then you can take this ratchet off, and then it's just a simple reversal. I'm going to put this back on your bracket, screw this back on. You'll go, make sure, remember this wire here. Do not forget this wire. It's very thin and it crack, and you'll see it's mounted here. So either make sure it goes up and over, or if you're putting it through, make sure you don't pinch it. And then I don't disconnect that. All I did because I don't want to waste the fluid, I left that connector there. I pinched the top hose off with a hose pinch, and on the this little tube here I shoved a paper towel in there so it doesn't leak. And don't forget to hook these back up and the clamps on them. They basically fall back in place. Once that's done, I tie strap this. I tie strap everything. I buy stock in tie strap companies. Cut these. You can cut this one, it holds it up. You can go ahead and, after you screw these back on, put this back, mount that back on. I would get everything with the radiator hooked back up, get the hose clamp back on, and then put this module back in. And it's quite simple. It's a reversal. It's only two bolts really holding this down, with the exception of the hoses. And when you do it, just reverse everything you did. Yeah, they may not look exactly the same, especially the batch that sinks down to the bottom might not exactly be the same, but it worked for me. When I restarted the car, I heard no problems. The only problem I had was because one of the wires was messed up, and that's the fix I'm going to do now. This thing real fast, just had a note. There's a little blower assembly here. I don't know what these parts are for. I don't care. I just know to try to keep all this stuff clean. To access this, what I did is I took these two screws out, and then I took this screw out, and you cannot put it back together wrong. It only goes one way. And when I pulled this up, I found a little, believe it or not, I found a little dirt, like a piece of stick underneath this. And it's like a blower assembly. Obviously have something to do with maybe cooling this thing down, or airflow, I don't know. Anyway, but I did do that, and I did find dirt in it. I cleaned that out with air hose as well. And then go ahead and set to reassembling. Lots of pictures, and take your time. And people tell you, oh, it's going to stop running, it's going to stop this, it's going to stop that. No, it won't. Keep your hands clean, don't get any dirt on it, and you'll be fine. In the worst case scenario, go buy that stuff from CRC, the electronics cleaner, spray a little bit on the contacts for the one that does not destroy the plastic, and a little dielectric grease if you want. I don't do it, I just keep it clean. Tire back on, headlights back on. I would leave the pan off on the bottom, only in case that you do have a problem with it. That's one less step. It'll be the last step. And then hook your battery back up, start it up. I noticed that because once I disconnected everything, the engine code, the code went off, but the battery light was still on, and that's because I had a problem with the wiring. And I'm going to have to disconnect it now to do that. All right, just some tips for the 4.2 liter Jag. And again, in another video, I will, if you do have a problem with that pin, I'm going to do the fix now. And if I can get it right, then I will show you what that fix is. There was nothing on the internet to tell you how to fix it. Nothing. Other than going out and buying a whole new wiring harness, or finding one, clipping it, and trying to get in there and attach it. It is not an easy task. They do not make it easy, and that's why they charge you a fortune. And the estimates range from anywhere from $867 to over $3,000 to replace these. Because if the wiring harness goes bad, they're not going to sell you the clip. They're going to sell you the whole wiring harness. There is no part for that. eBay sells some additional Denso alternator parts for like Toyotas or other vehicles. They say they'll fit. I'm not going to spend my money. I bought some 3-pin connectors, try modifying and putting in myself. They don't work either. You're wasting your time. So I made a rig that seems to have worked, but unfortunately when I was messing with it, I didn't do one of my connections very well, and one of the wires, not in the alternator, one of the external wires popped out. So I have to do a little bit better job on that. It's my mistake, my fault. And again, I will show you the proper order for the fix, so you don't have that problem. And you're going to be wasting days like I did trying to find the part. That's how you do your alternator for under 300 bucks. All right. If I forgot anything or left any details out, or if you guys have any other information, let me know. Yeah, there's a lot of extra work to do what I did, but I don't like the scratch, the cuts, and I just like it to go easy, and putting it back together is 10 times easier than taking it apart. Everybody knows that. And do not be afraid of this and the computer. Don't be afraid of it. Over and out.